The sound of Catherine Greene's rifle echoed across the canyon, just as the sun crested the mountains. And Colt Garrison knew right then that his quiet life was about to get complicated. He had ridden out before dawn to check on the fence line along the northern pasture of his ranch outside Cannon City, Colorado Territory, and found her standing over a dead rattlesnake. Her horse spooked, but held firm by reins wrapped around her gloved hand. She wore a black dress covered by a worn leather coat, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun beneath a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. It was late March in 1878, and the morning air still carried winter's bite. "You all right, madam?" Colt called out, guiding his bay gelding closer at an easy pace so as not to startle her horse further. She turned to face him, and he noticed the weariness in her green eyes, the kind that came from grief rather than lack of sleep. "I am fine, thank you. The snake spooked my mare." "I apologize for trespassing on your land." Colt dismounted and approached the dead snake, noting her clean shot had taken its head clean off. "That is some shooting. Most folks would have missed in a panic. My husband taught me well." She said it without emotion, stating a simple fact. "I am Colt Garrison. This is my ranch you are riding through, Margaret Jenkins. My friends call me Maggie." She extended her hand and shook his with a firm grip that surprised him. "I am new to the area. I was looking for work, actually. Someone in town mentioned you might need help with your ranch." Colt studied her more carefully. She looked to be in her mid-20s, perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong build that suggested she was no stranger to hard work. The black dress and her introduction told him everything he needed to know. "You are a widow. 3 months now. A mining accident in Leadville took my husband. We had only been married a year." She said it matter-of-factly, but Colt caught the tremor in her voice. "I need work, Mr. Garrison. I can ride, shoot, rope, and I am not afraid of hard labor. I will work for fair wages and expect nothing more than that." Colt was 30 years old and had been running his ranch alone since his father passed 2 years prior. His mother had moved to Denver to live with his sister, and he had been managing with the help of 2 ranch hands who came and went with the seasons. He could use another set of capable hands, especially with spring roundup coming. But hiring a woman, a widow no less, would set tongues wagging in Cannon City. "Can you mend fence?" he asked. "Yes. Brand cattle, I have done it. Ride all day in weather that would freeze the breath in your lungs or bake you like bread. I have survived worse, Mr. Garrison." He believed her. There was steel in her voice despite the grief in her eyes. "I have a small cabin on the property. Used to be where my foreman lived before he retired. It needs some work, but it is weather-tight. You can stay there. Wages are $30 a month plus room and board. You will eat with me and the other hands in the main house. Work starts at sunup and ends at sundown, longer during roundup and branding season. Sundays you get a half day for church if you are inclined. Does that suit you?" Maggie's eyes widened slightly. "That is more than generous, Mr. Garrison. It is fair pay for fair work. But I will be honest with you, Mrs. Jenkins. This is hard country and ranching is harder work. If you cannot keep up, I will have to let you go." "You will have no complaints from me, Mr. Garrison. When can I start?" "Can you start today?" "I can." That was how Maggie Jenkins came to work on the Garrison Ranch, and how Colt's well-ordered life began its slow transformation into something he had not expected, and certainly had not planned for. The first weeks passed in a blur of work. Colt watched Maggie carefully, half expecting her to falter or quit, but she proved as capable as her word. She rode fence with him in the biting wind, her face red from cold but her hands steady as she worked the wire. She helped him pull a calf from a struggling heifer, her dress soaked in blood and birth fluid, never flinching. She could throw a rope as well as any cowhand he had known, and she sat a horse like she had been born in the saddle. The two other hands, both young men named Pete Dawson and Sam McCall, treated her with respect after the first day, when she outworked both of them during a fence repair that lasted from dawn until well after dark. They took their meals together in the main house, a simple structure Colt's father had built 20 years earlier when he first claimed this land. The conversations were sparse at first, mostly about the work ahead or the work completed, but gradually they began to learn small details about each other. Colt discovered that Maggie had grown up on a ranch in eastern Colorado, that her father had taught her everything he taught his sons before he lost the ranch to debt. She had married young, at 18, to a man named Thomas Jenkins who had promised her a future in the mining camps. That future had lasted exactly 1 year before a cave-in took him and 7 other men. Maggie learned that Colt had served briefly as a scout for the army before returning home to help his aging father run the ranch. He had never married, though he had been engaged once to a woman who decided ranch life was not for her and moved to San Francisco. He had been alone for nearly 5 years now, preferring the company of horses and cattle to the complications of courting. Spring gave way to early summer, and the ranch work intensified. They drove cattle to higher pastures, branded calves, and repaired the damage winter had inflicted on buildings and fences. Maggie worked alongside Colt and the other men without complaint, though he noticed she still wore black despite the heat. He wanted to tell her she could set aside morning clothes for practical work attire, but he held his tongue. Grief had its own timeline. One evening in mid-June, after a particularly grueling day moving cattle, Colt found Maggie sitting on the porch of her cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. He had brought her a jar of cool water from the spring house, thinking she might appreciate it after the dusty work. "Thank you," she said, accepting the jar and drinking deeply. "That is kind of you." He settled onto the porch step, keeping a respectful distance. "You did good work today. That bull gave us trouble, but you kept your head. My father always said panic is what gets you killed, not the bull." She smiled faintly, the first real smile he had seen from her. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was. Lost him to pneumonia when I was 16. My mother followed a year later. I think she died of heartbreak more than the influenza that took her." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade. Colt found himself noticing things about her he had tried not to notice before. The way the sunset caught in her hair, turning it copper. The strength in her hands, scarred and calloused from work but graceful nonetheless. The curve of her neck above the collar of her dress. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Garrison?" "Colt. You have been here 3 months. You can call me Colt." "Colt, then. Can I ask why you never married? Pete mentioned you had been engaged once." He should have known the ranch hands would gossip. "She wanted things I could not give her. Fancy dresses, theater, city life. I tried to be what she wanted, but I am a rancher. This land is in my blood. She made her choice and I made mine. Do you regret it?" "No." "Better to know before making vows than after." He paused. "Do you regret marrying your husband?" Maggie was quiet for a long moment. "No, Thomas was a good man, but I will admit the life he promised and the life we had were very different. I thought we would have more time to make it right." "Time is the one thing we never have enough of," Colt said. The summer passed in a rhythm of work and meals and brief moments of conversation that grew longer and more personal. Colt found himself looking for excuses to work near Maggie, to pair with her on tasks that required 2 people. He told himself it was because she was the most capable hand he had, which was true, but he knew there was more to it than that. He noticed the way she hummed while working, old songs he half remembered from his childhood. He noticed how she always saved the best pieces of meat for the ranch dogs, slipping them scraps when she thought no one was looking. He noticed that she had finally put aside the black dresses, and now wore practical split skirts and simple blouses in blues and greens that brought out the color of her eyes. In late July, a storm rolled in from the mountains with little warning, catching them out on the range checking on the herd. They took shelter in an old line shack, a one-room cabin his father had built years ago for exactly this purpose. Rain hammered the roof and lightning split the sky, spooking the horses they had tied under the overhang. Maggie stood at the small window, watching the storm with an expression Colt could not read. Water dripped from her hair and clothes, pooling on the rough wooden floor. "There should be some dry blankets in the chest," Colt said, moving to the old trunk in the corner. He pulled out 2 wool blankets that smelled of cedar and dust. "Here, you should get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." She turned to face him, and he saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. It was not fear or grief or even gratitude. It was awareness. The same awareness he had been fighting for months now. "Colt," she said quietly, "I am not sure that would be proper. I will turn my back. There is a change of clothes in the trunk too. Old things of my father's, but they will be dry." He did turn his back, listening to the rustle of fabric as she changed. His heart hammered in his chest harder than the rain on the roof. When she told him it was safe to turn around, she was wrapped in one of the blankets, her wet clothes hanging from a peg on the wall. She looked younger somehow, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Your turn," she said. "I will not have you catching pneumonia on my account." They spent the night in that line shack, each wrapped in their blanket, sitting against opposite walls while the storm raged outside. They talked through the night, sharing stories from their childhoods, their dreams and disappointments. Colt told her about his time as an Army scout, the things he had seen on the frontier that still haunted him. Maggie told him about losing her parents, about the loneliness of being the only woman in a mining camp, about the moment she learned her husband was gone and feeling guilty that her first emotion had been relief rather than grief. "Thomas was not cruel," she explained. "But he drank, and when he drank, he became someone else, someone angry and unpredictable. I mourned the man I married, not the man he became. Does that make me terrible?" "It makes you honest," Colt said. "Grief is not simple, Maggie. Anyone who tells you different has never truly lost someone." As dawn broke, the storm passed, leaving the world washed clean and new. They rode back to the ranch in silence, but something had shifted between them. A wall had come down. August brought brutal heat and the hardest work of the year. They moved cattle to the railroad in Cannon City for shipping, a 3-day drive that left everyone exhausted and coated in dust. Maggie proved her worth again and again, handling the herd with skill and keeping her temper even when the cattle proved obstinate. On the last night of the drive, while the others slept, Colt found Maggie sitting watch by the fire. He settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I have been thinking," he said carefully. "Pete is getting married in the fall. He will be moving to his wife's family ranch. Sam mentioned he might head to Wyoming come winter. I am going to need more permanent help." Maggie poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the night. "Are you asking if I plan to stay? I am asking if you would consider it. Staying on, I mean, permanently, not just as a hand." The words tumbled out before he could stop them, not at all what he had rehearsed in his head. She turned to look at him, her face half in shadow. "What are you saying, Colt?" He should have waited. He should have courted her properly, taken her to church socials, bought her nice things. But Colt had never been good with fancy words or proper timing. "I am saying that I have come to care for you. More than I should, maybe. More than is wise given you are my employee. but there it is. I know it has not been long since your husband passed, and I know this is not the romantic declaration you probably deserve, but I am not a romantic man. I am just a rancher who has fallen in love with a woman who can rope better than me and is not afraid of hard work or hard truths. Maggie stared at him for a long moment, and Colt felt his heart sink. He had misread everything. She was going to quit, going to leave, going to tell him he was a fool. Then she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You are a fool, Colt Garrison, but you are my kind of fool." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and brief, but it sent electricity through his entire body. "I have been waiting for you to say something for months now. I thought maybe I was imagining the way you looked at me." "I tried not to," he admitted. "It did not seem right, you being in mourning and working for me." "I have been in mourning long enough," Maggie said firmly. "Thomas is gone and I am alive. I think you would want me to be happy, to find love again, and I have found it if you will have me." Colt pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, smoke and soap and something uniquely her. "I will have you, Maggie Jenkins, in whatever way you will let me." They returned to the ranch the next day, and Colt announced to Pete and Sam that Maggie would be staying on permanently as his partner in running the ranch. The two hands exchanged knowing looks but said nothing. The whole territory probably knew how Colt felt about Maggie before he had admitted it to himself. The next few months were a sweet agony of courtship. They worked side by side during the day, stole kisses when they could, and sat together in the evenings on the porch of the main house talking about everything and nothing. Colt learned that Maggie loved to read but had few books. He ordered a crate of novels from Denver as a surprise. Maggie discovered that Colt had a talent for woodworking and was secretly carving furniture for a hope chest he thought she did not know about. In late September, Colt rode into Cannon City and purchased a ring from the jeweler, a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched Maggie's eyes. He had a plan to propose during the harvest dance in October, something public and proper that would make clear his intentions to the whole town. But plans rarely survived contact with reality. On a crisp October morning, Maggie's horse returned to the ranch without her. Colt's blood ran cold. He saddled his fastest horse and rode out with Pete and Sam, following the mare's tracks back to where Maggie had been checking the southern pasture. They found her at the bottom of a ravine, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle beneath her. She was conscious, but pale with pain and shock. "The ground gave way," she managed through gritted teeth. "I am sorry, I should have been more careful." "Hush," Colt said, his hands shaking as he examined her leg. It was broken badly, the bone visible through torn skin. "Pete, ride for the doctor in Cannon City, fast as you can." "Sam, help me make a travois. We need to get her back to the house." The next hours were a blur of pain and fear. The doctor, an older man named Henderson, set Maggie's leg and dosed her with laudanum for the pain. The break was bad, he warned. She might never walk properly again. She would certainly never be able to do ranch work the way she had. Colt sat by her bedside for 3 days and nights while fever raged through her body. The leg had become infected despite the doctor's best efforts. Henderson warned him to prepare for the worst. On the third night, Maggie's fever broke. She woke to find Colt slumped in a chair beside her bed, his hand holding hers, his face haggard with worry and lack of sleep. "Colt," she whispered. His head snapped up. "Maggie, thank God, I thought I had lost you." "You cannot get rid of me that easily, Cowboy." Her voice was weak, but her eyes were clear. "Though Dr. Henderson tells me my cattle driving days are over." "I do not care if you never sit a horse again," Colt said fiercely. "As long as you are alive, as long as you are here with me, nothing else matters. I cannot work the ranch anymore. I will be useless to you. You could never be useless to me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring he had been carrying for weeks. I had planned to do this properly at the dance with the whole town watching. But I have learned that tomorrow is not promised. Margaret Jenkins, will you marry me? Not as my hired hand, but as my wife, my partner, my love. Tears streamed down Maggie's face. Yes. Yes, Colt Garrison, I will marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her gently, mindful of her injuries. We will make it work. Whatever comes, we will face it together. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in Cannon City. Maggie walked down the aisle with a cane, her leg still healing, but her head held high. She wore a simple blue dress the color of a summer sky, and Colt thought she had never looked more beautiful. Pete served as best man, and Mrs. Henderson from town stood up with Maggie as her matron of honor. The reception was held at the ranch, with half the town turning out to celebrate. There was dancing and food and laughter, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Maggie felt completely happy. That night, in the main house that was now their home, Colt carried Maggie over the threshold despite her protests that her leg would not allow such romance. "You are hurt, not helpless," he said, setting her gently on their bed. "And I have waited long enough to have you as my wife." Their lovemaking was tender and sweet, mindful of her healing leg but passionate nonetheless. Colt took his time learning every inch of her, memorizing what made her gasp and sigh. Maggie discovered that, beneath his quiet exterior, her husband was a man of deep passion and surprising gentleness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the lamp burning low, talking about their future. "I have been thinking," Maggie said. "I cannot work cattle anymore, but I can manage accounts. I am good with numbers. And I can oversee the household, manage the vegetable garden, handle the chickens and the dairy cows. I can still be useful." "Maggie, you are not just useful, you are essential. To this ranch, to me, to everything." He kissed her forehead. "We are partners now, truly." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by mid-November. Maggie's leg healed slowly, and though she would always walk with a slight limp, she regained most of her mobility. She threw herself into managing the domestic side of the ranch with the same intensity she had brought to cattle work. She organized the ranch accounts, discovering they could save money by buying supplies in bulk and selling butter and eggs in town. She planted an extensive garden the following spring, putting up preserves and vegetables for winter. She turned the small room off the kitchen into an office where she kept meticulous records of every expense and every head of cattle. Colt hired 2 new hands to replace Pete and Sam, young men named Johnny and William who were hard workers but needed guidance. Maggie taught them how to keep proper records and manage their wages. Colt taught them the ways of cattle and horses. Spring arrived with its usual chaos of calving and branding. Maggie could not ride out for the roundup, but she managed the logistics from home, ensuring supplies were delivered to the line camps, keeping track of the tally, preparing meals for the exhausted crew at the end of each long day. One evening in late May, Colt returned to find Maggie sitting on the porch, her hand pressed to her stomach, a strange expression on her face. "What is wrong? Is it your leg?" He was beside her in an instant. "No, the leg is fine." She looked up at him with eyes that shone with tears and joy. "Colt, I am with child. I went to see Dr. Henderson today to be sure, and he confirmed it. We are going to have a baby." Colt felt his knees go weak. He sat down heavily beside her, pulling her close. "A baby? Maggie, that is wonderful. Are you all right? Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine. The doctor says I am healthy despite the leg. The baby should come sometime in January." Colt pressed his hand to her stomach, still flat but holding their future. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Maggie said, kissing him. This child will be so loved. The summer months passed in a haze of joy and preparation. Colt worked on transforming the smallest bedroom into a nursery, building a cradle from cherry wood and a rocking chair that matched. Maggie sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands busy whenever she sat down. The pregnancy was not easy. Maggie suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and her injured leg ached more as her body changed. But she never complained, and Colt did everything he could to make her comfortable. In early September, a letter arrived from Denver. Colt's mother had fallen ill and was asking to see him. He did not want to leave Maggie, especially with the baby coming, but she insisted. "Go see your mother." "I will be fine. I have 4 more months before the baby arrives, and Johnny and William are good workers. I will not be alone." Reluctantly, Colt made the journey to Denver. His mother was indeed ill, but seeing her son seemed to revive her spirits. He stayed 2 weeks, helping his sister care for their mother and settling some of the family affairs. When he returned to the ranch, he found Maggie in the office, her stomach now noticeably rounded, poring over ledgers with a concerned expression. "What is wrong?" She looked up, and the relief on her face at seeing him made his heart clench. "Nothing is wrong now that you are home, but we have a problem. One of the herds has been hit by rustlers. William found them gone 3 days ago." Colt felt anger surge through him. "How many head?" 20 at least. "Maybe more. They hit the northern pasture, the most remote section." "Did William track them?" "He tried, but lost the trail in the rocks near the canyon." "Colt, we cannot afford to lose much more. Those 20 head represent a significant portion of our profit for the year." Colt knew she was right. Rustling was a constant threat, but they had been lucky so far. "I will ride out tomorrow with the hands. We will see if we can pick up the trail." "Be careful," Maggie said, moving to embrace him despite her awkwardness. "I need you to come back to me." "Always," he promised. They spent 3 days tracking the rustlers before finding the small canyon where the stolen cattle were being held. There were 4 men, rough-looking characters who clearly knew what they were doing. Colt sent Johnny to fetch the sheriff from Cannon City, while he and William kept watch. The sheriff arrived with a deputy, and they managed to arrest 3 of the rustlers without violence. The 4th escaped into the hills, but the recovered cattle were returned to Colt's ranch. The incident shook them both. Colt realized how vulnerable they were out on the ranch, especially with Maggie pregnant and unable to defend herself the way she once could. He purchased 2 new dogs, large animals trained to alert at intruders, and made sure Maggie always had a loaded rifle within reach. October brought early snow and the first real cold. Maggie moved slowly now, her belly large and her leg troubling her more. Dr. Henderson visited weekly to check on her, always pronouncing her healthy but warning that the birth might be complicated given her injury. In late December, 3 weeks before her due date, Maggie went into labor. It happened in the middle of the night, waking Colt with a gasp of pain. "It is too early," she said, fear in her voice. "Babies come when they come," Colt said with more confidence than he felt. He sent William riding hard for the doctor while he helped Maggie through the contractions. The labor was long and difficult. Maggie's injured leg made positioning difficult, and the baby seemed in no hurry to arrive. Dr. Henderson arrived at dawn and took over, barking orders at Colt to boil water and bring clean linens. It was nearly noon before their son finally arrived, small but healthy, with a loud cry that filled the house. Colt held his child for the first time, marveling at the tiny perfection of him, the little fists and wisps of dark hair. "He looks like you," Maggie said weakly from the bed. "He has your eyes," Colt replied, bringing the baby to her. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without deciding. But looking at his son, Colt knew. Charles, after my father, Charles Thomas for both our fathers. Charles Thomas Garrison, Maggie said, tears streaming down her face as she held their son. It is perfect. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful. Charlie, as they called him, was a good baby who rarely cried except when hungry. Maggie recovered slowly from the birth, her leg giving her more trouble than before, but she was determined to care for her son herself. Colt found himself utterly transformed by fatherhood. He would wake early just to watch his son sleep, marveling that he had helped create this perfect tiny human. He found excuses to come in from work throughout the day, ostensibly to check on Maggie but really just to hold Charlie. Spring arrived with its usual demands, but everything felt different now. Colt worked with renewed purpose, knowing he was building something to pass on to his son. Maggie managed the household and the accounts with Charlie strapped to her back in a sling, the baby content to watch his mother work. In late summer, when Charlie was 7 months old, Colt's mother arrived for a visit. Her health had improved, and she was determined to meet her grandson. She stayed through the fall, helping Maggie with the baby and the household, teaching her daughter-in-law family recipes, and telling stories of Colt's childhood that made him groan with embarrassment. "You were such a serious child," his mother said one evening as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Always thinking, always planning. I worried you would never find someone who could make you laugh." She smiled at Maggie. "I am glad you found him, my dear. You are good for my son." "He is good for me too," Maggie said, bouncing Charlie on her knee. "Better than I ever imagined." Colt's mother left in November, returning to Denver with promises to visit again in the spring. The ranch settled into its winter routine, the work slowing as snow fell. On Christmas Eve, Colt gave Maggie a gift he had been working on for months. It was a wooden box, intricately carved with scenes of the ranch, cattle in the pasture, the mountains in the distance, the house where they lived. Inside was a leather-bound journal. "For your writing," he said. "You mentioned once that you used to keep a journal when you were young. I thought you might want to start again, to record Charlie's growing up, to write about our life here." Maggie traced the carvings with her finger, her eyes shining. "It is beautiful, Colt. I will treasure it always." She handed him a wrapped package. "My gift seems small in comparison." He unwrapped it to find a vest, beautifully made from soft leather with silver buttons. "Maggie, this is incredible. Did you make this?" "I did. I wanted you to have something special, something that showed how proud I am to be your wife." They sat together by the fire that night, Charlie asleep in his cradle, and talked about how far they had come. From employer and employee to husband and wife, from two lonely people to a family. "I never thought I would be this happy again," Maggie said quietly. "After Thomas died, after I lost everything, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just work until I was too old or broken, and then I would die alone." "You will never be alone," Colt said fiercely. "I promise you that. Whatever comes, we face it together." The years passed in the way of ranching life, marked by seasons and cattle drives, calves born and crops harvested. Charlie grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's green eyes and his father's serious demeanor. He took his first steps chasing after the ranch dogs and spoke his first word watching his father work. "Cow." When Charlie was 2, Maggie discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in early spring they welcomed a daughter. She was born during a thunderstorm, coming so fast that Dr. Henderson barely arrived in time. They named her Catherine Marie after Colt's mother and Maggie's. Katie, as they called her, was her brother's opposite in every way. Where Charlie was serious and thoughtful, Katie was joyful and bold. She learned to walk at 9 months and immediately wanted to do everything her big brother did. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Maggie's careful accounting and planning allowed them to weather bad years and capitalize on good ones. Colt's skill with cattle and his reputation for honesty made him a respected figure in Cannon City. They added to their herd gradually, purchased more land, built new barns and outbuildings. When Charlie was 5 and Katie was 3, they hired a young teacher to come to the ranch 3 days a week. Miss Sarah Peterson was fresh from a teacher's college in the East, earnest and enthusiastic about education. She taught the children reading and arithmetic, basic science and history. Maggie often sat in on the lessons, reading the books Miss Peterson brought and asking questions. She had received little formal education as a child, and she was determined her children would have every opportunity she had not. One afternoon in late summer, Colt came in from work to find Maggie in the office, not working on accounts but writing in the journal he had given her years before. She looked up with a strange expression. "I have been thinking," she said, "about how much has changed, about how blessed we are, and I realized I never properly thanked you." "For what?" "For giving me a chance that day I rode onto your land, for hiring me when other men would not have, for seeing past the widow in mourning to the person underneath, for loving me even when I was not sure I could love again." Colt crossed to her and pulled her close. "I should be thanking you. You taught me that taking a risk on someone can change your entire life. That love can find you even in the most unexpected places." "We took a risk on each other," Maggie said, "and look what we built." They stood together at the window of the office, looking out at the ranch they had built together, watching their children play in the yard. Charlie was teaching Katie how to rope a fence post, patient and careful with his energetic little sister. That evening, after the children were in bed, Maggie and Colt sat on the porch as they did most nights, watching the stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. The air was warm and carried the scent of hay and horses, familiar and comforting. "You ever miss it?" Colt asked. "Riding out with the herd, doing the hard work?" Maggie considered the question. "Sometimes I miss the freedom of it, the challenge. But I would not trade what we have now for anything. This life, our children, our partnership, it is everything I never knew I wanted." "I know what you mean," Colt said. "Before you came, I thought I had everything I needed, the ranch, the work, my solitude. I did not know I was lonely until I was not anymore." Life continued its steady rhythm through the years. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Colt and Maggie's love deepened in the way of long marriages, growing quieter but stronger with each passing season. When Charlie was 8, Colt began teaching him the ranching business in earnest. The boy took to it naturally, showing a patience with animals and an understanding of the land that reminded Colt of his own father. Katie, now 6, preferred helping her mother with the horses. She had a gift with them, able to calm even the most fractious animal with her gentle touch and soft voice. In the spring of Charlie's 10th year, Maggie's leg, which had troubled her on and off since the accident, began to pain her more severely. Dr. Henderson, now quite elderly himself, examined her and shook his head. "The bone did not set quite right all those years ago, Mrs. Garrison. Age and the strain of ranch life have taken their toll. I can give you laudanum for the pain, but beyond that, there is little I can do." Maggie refused the laudanum except on the worst days. She was determined to remain clear-headed and active despite the pain. Colt adapted their life where he could, building her a mounting block so she could still ride when needed, constructing a wheeled chair for the days when walking was too difficult. "I am falling apart," Maggie said one particularly bad evening, tears of frustration in her eyes as Colt helped her to bed. "You are the strongest person I know," Colt countered. "A bad leg does not change that. I am useless." You are the heart of this family and this ranch. You are many things, Maggie Garrison, but useless has never been one of them. The summer of 1891 brought drought and worry. The streams ran low, and the grass turned brown despite it being only early July. Colt and the hands worked day and night to keep the cattle watered and healthy, while Maggie rationed their supplies and planned carefully for what might be a difficult winter. In late August, the rains finally came, breaking the drought and saving the herd. That night, the whole family stood on the porch in the downpour, laughing and soaking up the blessed water. Fall brought an unexpected visitor. A young woman arrived at the ranch on a tired horse, looking for work. She was perhaps 19 or 20, with determined eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. Colt studied her, seeing echoes of another young widow who had arrived at his ranch seeking employment 13 years earlier. "What is your name?" "Anna Frost, sir." "I can ride and rope, and I am not afraid of hard work." Maggie came out onto the porch, leaning on her cane. "Where are you from, Miss Frost?" "Nevada, madam. My family lost our ranch to the bank. I need work and wages to help them." Maggie and Colt exchanged a look, an entire conversation passing between them in a glance. "Can you start tomorrow?" Maggie asked. "Yes, madam." Anna Frost proved as capable as promised and became a fixture on the ranch. She was like an older sister to Charlie and Katie, patient and kind but firm when needed. She worked alongside the hands, never asking for special treatment, earning their respect through sheer competence. The years continued their march. Charlie turned 14, then 15, growing tall and strong, more capable with each passing season. Katie, at 13, was already an accomplished rider and had begun training horses with a skill that impressed even her father. Colt turned 51 in the winter of 1895, though he claimed he felt no older than 30. Maggie turned 42 the following spring, her hair now streaked with silver, her face lined by years of sun and wind and laughter. On their 17th wedding anniversary, Colt surprised Maggie with a trip to Denver. It was the first time either of them had left the ranch for more than a day or two since Charlie was born. They left the ranch in the capable hands of Anna and the older children and spent a week in the city. They attended the theater, something Maggie had never experienced, and ate at restaurants where other people served them. They stayed in a hotel with running water and electric lights, modern conveniences that both fascinated and unnerved them. But what Maggie loved most was simply walking through the city on Colt's arm, window shopping and watching the people, marveling at how different this life was from their ranch life. "Could you ever live here?" Colt asked one evening as they prepared for bed in their hotel room. "No," Maggie said without hesitation. "This is a nice visit, but the ranch is home. The ranch is where my heart is." "Mine too," Colt agreed, pulling her close. "Mine too." They returned to the ranch rejuvenated, ready to tackle another year of work and life. Charlie had managed everything perfectly in their absence, confirming what they had already known. Their son was ready to take on more responsibility. That fall, Colt began formally training Charlie in all aspects of running the ranch. Maggie did the same with the business and accounting side, teaching Katie alongside Charlie since their daughter showed an aptitude for numbers. Life had settled into comfortable patterns when, in the spring of 1897, those patterns were disrupted by wonderful news. Katie, now 15, announced that she had been offered a scholarship to attend a school for advanced studies in Denver. Her work with horses had attracted the attention of a wealthy rancher who believed she had a gift worth nurturing. Maggie's first instinct was to say no, to keep her daughter close and safe. But looking at Katie's shining eyes, her excitement and hope, Maggie remembered her own lack of opportunities and could not deny her daughter what she herself had never had. "You can go," Maggie said. "But you must promise to come home for summers and holidays, and you must write us every week." Katie threw her arms around her mother. "I promise. Thank you, Mama. Thank you, Papa." In the fall, they took Katie to Denver to begin her schooling. Leaving her there was one of the hardest things either parent had ever done, but they knew it was right. The ranch felt empty without Katie's energy and laughter. But Charlie filled the space with his steady presence, and life continued. He was 17 now, nearly a man, working alongside his father as an equal partner. In the winter of 1898, Anna Frost married one of the ranch hands, a steady young man named Robert Tucker. They had a small wedding at the ranch, and Maggie gave Anna one of her own dresses to wear, altered to fit. The couple moved into the cabin that had once been Maggie's, the cabin where her new life had truly begun all those years ago. Spring came again, as it always did, bringing with it renewal and hard work. Colt was 54 now, Maggie 45, and they both felt their age more than they cared to admit. But they had each other, they had their children, they had the ranch they had built together. On a warm May evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. It was the same view they had watched together for almost 20 years, and it never grew old. "You remember the first time we sat together like this?" Maggie asked. "You brought me water after a hard day moving cattle." "I remember," Colt said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and trying very hard not to think that because you worked for me and had just lost your husband. I remember thinking you had kind eyes," Maggie said, "and wondering if it was wrong to notice that when Thomas had been gone only a few months. We were both fighting it, even then. We were." Maggie took his hand, her fingers lacing through his with the ease of long practice. "I am glad we stopped fighting. I am glad you found the courage to ask me to stay forever." "Best decision I ever made," Colt said. "You made me believe in love again, Maggie. You made me believe in everything again." Summer arrived with its heat and work. Katie came home from school, full of stories about her classes and her friends, excited to show off the new techniques she had learned for training horses. She spent the summer working alongside her father and brother, proving she had lost none of her skill. Charlie, now 18, had grown into a fine young man, responsible and capable. Several of the young women in Cannon City had set their caps at him, but he seemed oblivious to their attention, focused entirely on learning everything he could about ranching. One afternoon in late July, Charlie approached his parents with unusual nervousness. "I need to talk to you both about something." They sat together in the parlor, and Charlie twisted his hat in his hands before speaking. "I have been thinking about the future, about my future. I love this ranch, and I want to run it someday. But I also want to see more of the world first. I want to learn how other ranches operate, maybe work on some of the big spreads in Montana or Wyoming for a year or two. Not to leave for good, but to learn and grow before I settle down." Colt felt a pang of disappointment, but understood completely. He had done something similar in his own youth, scouting for the army before returning home. "I think that is a wise plan, son. A man should see something of the world before he puts down roots. You are not angry, not angry. Proud that you are thinking about your future so carefully." Charlie left in the fall, heading north to work on a large cattle operation in Montana. The ranch felt emptier still, but Colt and Maggie adapted. They hired additional hands to make up for Charlie's absence, and continued the work they had always done. Katie returned to school in Denver for another year, and the house was quiet in a way it had not been since before the children were born. Maggie found herself drifting through rooms that had once echoed with young voices, touching toys and books left behind. Missing them? Colt asked one evening, finding her in Katie's room holding a worn doll. Terribly. Is this what it feels like when children grow up? This ache in your chest like something vital is missing? I think so. Colt put his arms around her. But they are living their lives, following their dreams. That is what we raised them to do. I know. It does not make it easier, though. No, Colt agreed. It does not. They spent that winter closer than ever. Just the two of them and the ranch hands, working and living and growing older together. Maggie's leg continued to trouble her, and some mornings she could barely walk. But she refused to slow down, managing the household and accounts with the same efficiency she always had. In the spring of 1899, Charlie returned home. He was leaner, harder, weathered by a year of tough work in harsh conditions. But his eyes shone with enthusiasm. "I learned so much, Pa. About breeding programs and range management, about new techniques for handling large herds. I want to implement some of those things here if you will let me. This ranch is as much yours as mine, son. Show me what you learned." Together, father and son began implementing changes. Charlie's new ideas about selective breeding and rotational grazing improved the quality of their herd. Katie, home for the summer, applied her schooling to their horse training program, developing techniques that produced animals known throughout the territory for their quality and temperament. Watching their children work together, Maggie felt a deep satisfaction. They had built something lasting, something that would continue after they were gone. In early 1900, as the new century dawned, the family gathered for a photograph. The photographer came from Cannon City with his equipment, setting up in front of the main house. Colt and Maggie sat in chairs, with Charlie standing behind his father and Katie behind her mother. The resulting image captured them perfectly, a family bound by love and work and shared purpose. That spring brought a surprise. Anna and Robert Tucker's first child, a daughter, was born, and they asked Colt and Maggie to be godparents. Holding the tiny baby, Maggie felt tears slide down her cheeks. "I am being silly," she said, wiping at her eyes. "But she reminds me of Katie at this age. It makes me realize how fast time passes." "Too fast," Colt agreed, watching his daughter coo over the baby with maternal tenderness. The years that followed were good ones, marked by slow growth and steady prosperity. Charlie courted and married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, a sensible young woman named Elizabeth, who fit into ranch life as if born to it. They married in 1901, and Colt built them a house on the northern section of the property, close enough to be family but far enough to have their own life. Katie finished her schooling and returned home permanently, establishing a horse training business that drew clients from across Colorado and beyond. She remained unmarried, claiming she was too busy and too independent for a husband, though Maggie suspected her daughter simply had not met anyone who measured up to her father. In 1902, Maggie turned 50, and Colt threw her a party that brought together friends from across the territory. Looking around at the gathered crowd, at the children and grandchildren, at the ranch hands who were like family, Maggie felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to Colt as they danced to music provided by a fiddler from town. "For what?" "For everything. For hiring me all those years ago, for falling in love with me, for building this life with me." "You are the one who deserves thanks," Colt said. "You took a lonely cowboy and taught him what it means to have a family, to have a home that is more than just a place to sleep. Everything good in my life came from the day you rode onto my land." In 1903, Charlie and Elizabeth welcomed their first child, a son they named Colt after his grandfather. Holding his namesake, Colt felt the circle of life complete itself. He was a grandfather now, his son running the ranch alongside him, his daughter established in her own successful business. Maggie's health had become more fragile with age. Her leg pained her constantly now, and she had developed a weakness in her lungs that worried Dr. Henderson's successor, a younger man named Dr. Mills. But she refused to be treated as an invalid, continuing to manage the household and accounts from her chair or bed when needed. In the summer of 1904, Maggie suffered a serious bout of pneumonia. For weeks, she lingered between life and death, her breathing labored, her body frail. Colt barely left her side, reading to her, talking to her, holding her hand through the long nights. "Do not leave me," he whispered one particularly bad night. "Please, Maggie, I am not ready to lose you." She opened her eyes, fever bright but clear. "I am not going anywhere yet, Cowboy. You are stuck with me a while longer." And she was right. She fought her way back from the edge of death, her stubborn will refusing to surrender. By fall, she was weak but recovering, able to sit up and take short walks with Colt's assistance. On their 27th wedding anniversary, Colt carried her out to the porch so she could watch the sunset. She was so light in his arms now, fragile as a bird, but her eyes still held that same spark he had fallen in love with decades ago. 27 years, she said wonderingly. "Where did they go?" "Into this," Colt said, gesturing to the ranch, the mountains, the life they had built. "Into our children and grandchildren, into every fence we mended and every calf we branded, into every conversation on this porch and every night in each other's arms." "No regrets?" Maggie asked. "Not a single one. You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner," Maggie said. "That we did not have more years together. We have now. That is enough." Maggie recovered slowly, never quite regaining her full strength but stabilizing enough to resume a modified version of her normal life. Charlie took over more of the ranch management, with Colt serving as advisor rather than primary operator. Katie's horse business thrived, and she surprised everyone by marrying a horse trader from Wyoming, a quiet man who understood her need for independence. In 1905, Elizabeth gave Colt and Maggie their second grandchild, a daughter named Margaret after her grandmother. Katie married that same year, and Colt found himself walking both his daughter and his daughter-in-law down the aisle in the same season. "We are getting old," he said to Maggie one evening as they watched their grandchildren play in the yard. "Speak for yourself," Maggie retorted, but she was smiling. "We are not old, we are experienced." "Is that what we are calling it?" "It is what I am calling it." She took his hand. "Colt, I need to tell you something, in case I do not get another chance. Do not talk like that. Hush and listen. I need you to know that these years with you have been the happiest of my life. When I rode onto your land that day, I was lost and broken and convinced I would never be whole again. You put me back together. You gave me purpose and love and a family. You gave me everything." Colt felt tears sting his eyes. "You gave me the same, Maggie. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat together as the sun set, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that would endure long after they were gone. The years continued to pass, slower now, measured in grandchildren's birthdays and seasonal changes rather than the frantic pace of their younger days. Colt turned 65 in 1909, Maggie 56. They were old now, truly old, their bodies marked by decades of hard work and hard living. But they were happy. Charlie ran the ranch with skill and care, honoring his parents' legacy while making his own mark. He and Elizabeth had 4 children now, keeping the house full of noise and laughter. Katie and her husband established a renowned horse breeding program, their animals sought after from Texas to Montana. In the spring of 1910, on a warm afternoon in May, Maggie asked Colt to take her riding. It had been years since she had been on a horse, her leg too weak to manage it safely. But she was insistent. "One more ride," she said. "I want to see the ranch from horseback one more time." Colt saddled their gentlest mare and helped Maggie mount, then swung up behind her, holding her steady as they walked slowly through the pastures. They rode to the place where they had first met, where she had shot that rattlesnake all those years ago. "You remember?" Maggie asked. "Every detail," Colt said. "You were the most capable woman I had ever seen. I knew right then you were going to change my life." "I did not know," Maggie admitted. "I just knew I needed work and you were willing to give me a chance. Everything else came after." They rode back to the house as the sun began to set, Maggie leaning back against Colt's chest, his arms secure around her. It was perfect, he thought. A perfect moment in a life full of perfect moments. That night, Maggie had another attack, her lungs seizing, her breathing labored. Dr. Mills came but could do little except make her comfortable. The family gathered, children and grandchildren filling the house with quiet tears and whispered prayers. Colt sat by her bedside, holding her hand, refusing to leave even when the children urged him to rest. 3 days Maggie lingered in and out of consciousness, fighting still even as her body failed. On the third night, she woke clear-eyed and lucid. "Colt, I am here, my love. Take care of them. The children, the grandchildren, take care of the ranch. I will, I promise. And do not mourn too long. I want you to be happy. I cannot be happy without you. Then remember the happy times. Remember our life together. That is all I want." She smiled, that same smile that had captured his heart decades ago. "I love you, Colt Garrison. From the moment you hired me to forever after. I love you, Maggie. Forever after." She closed her eyes then, her breathing slowing, gentling. Colt felt the moment she left, felt her spirit slip away like a sigh on the wind, but her hand remained warm in his for a long time after. They buried Maggie on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a cottonwood tree where she had loved to sit on summer afternoons. The whole territory turned out for her funeral, ranchers and townspeople alike paying their respects to a woman who had earned her place through hard work and harder times. Colt stood at her grave long after everyone else left, talking to her as he had always talked to her, sharing his thoughts and fears and memories. "I am not ready for this," he told her. "I am not ready to do this without you." But ready or not, life continued. The ranch needed running, grandchildren needed loving, and time marched forward whether he willed it or not. The next 3 years passed in a blur for Colt. He continued working, though his body protested more each day. He spent time with his grandchildren, teaching them about ranching and horses and the land. He sat on the porch each evening, talking to Maggie's memory about the day's events. Charlie worried about his father, seeing him age rapidly without Maggie's steadying presence. But Colt insisted he was fine, that he was just tired, that he would rest when the work was done. In the summer of 1913, Colt turned 69. His children and grandchildren threw him a party, bringing together the family and friends he had accumulated over a lifetime. It was a good day, full of laughter and love. That night, after everyone had gone home, Colt sat on the porch watching the stars. He felt Maggie's presence beside him, as real as if she sat in her chair. "I miss you," he said aloud. "Every day I miss you." The wind whispered through the cottonwoods, and Colt could almost hear her voice in it. "I know, Cowboy, but you will see me again. When your work is done, you will see me again." 3 months later, on a crisp October morning, Colt did not wake up. He died peacefully in his sleep, still strong in body but weary in spirit, ready to join his beloved wife. They buried him beside Maggie under the cottonwood tree. Charlie spoke at his father's funeral, his voice breaking as he talked about a man who had taught him everything about ranching and life and love. My father always said that hiring my mother was the best decision he ever made, Charlie said. He told me once that she taught him what it meant to truly live, not just exist. They built this ranch together, this family together, this life together, and now they are together again. The years that followed proved the truth of that legacy. Charlie and his siblings ran the ranch with the same care and dedication their parents had shown. They expanded it, modernized it where needed, but always honored the foundation Colt and Maggie had built. The grandchildren grew up hearing stories of their grandparents. The widow who rode onto the ranch seeking work, the cowboy who fell in love with her despite his better judgment. How they had built a life together through hard work and harder times. How their love had endured through illness and injury, through loss and triumph. The story became family legend, passed down through generations. The Garrison Ranch remained in the family for decades, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to face life together. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, ranch hands swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the old house. A man and a woman, their chairs close together, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, forever bound by a love that had started with a simple question asked by a cowboy who finally found the courage to ask a widow to stay forever. The ranch stood as their monument, every fence post and barn, every head of cattle and acre of pasture a testament to their partnership. But their true legacy was in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their values forward into the future. In the end, theirs was a simple story. Two people who found each other when they needed it most, who built something lasting from nothing but hard work and love, who proved that sometimes the best things in life come not from planning but from taking a chance on someone unexpected. And in that simplicity was everything that mattered.